What is the most disgusting thing you did willingly? Warning. Some of these posts are quite graphic and very gross. I'd advise not eating while watching, or continuing if you're sensitive to graphic descriptions. Number 1. Brento's Clean says, when I was 6 or 7, I was staying the night at a friend's house and had explosive diarrhea in the middle of the night. Only after finishing and trying to flush, I remembered his parents telling me not to use that toilet as it was out of order. I then spent the next 30 to 40 minutes slowly scooping the liquid shit out of the toilet that wouldn't flush, with my bare hands, into the trash can. Then I washed my hands thoroughly and went back to bed. His parents found the diarrhea-filled trash can the next morning, no doubt by the smell, and had a stern but heartfelt talk with me. That was almost 30 years ago and I'm still disgusted by it. Nipson replied, when I finished school and finally started working as a hairdresser. Diarrhea struck me on my very first day. Not only did I disappear for like 30 minutes, I ultimately clogged the toilet so hard that it spilled over. I was drenched in sweat, trying to remove the mess as fast as possible with nothing but my hands, some toilet paper and the tiniest bin on the planet. When suddenly a customer knocked on the door, I realized how long I was already in there and that I'm certainly unable to clean that up without anyone noticing. Suddenly my boss was knocking too and angrily expected me to explain this. I simply opened the door and they found me standing in shit and water, shit in my hands, shit in the sink, shit in the toilet, shit freaking everywhere. I was fired on the spot. Those are some messy stories that I'm sure still keep you up some nights. Number 2. Treeskinge says, I was on a Boy Scout campout and this kid kept hitting me with his bamboo stick, so I broke it in half and threw it away. He then decided to spit in my eye. So I proceeded to steal his bag of peanuts while he wasn't looking and filled the bag with my pee. I let it soak for a bit, then poured the pee out, and I let the bag dry in the sun for the rest of the day. The next morning, I placed the bag back in his tent and watched him eat the whole bag. He periodically looked at the peanuts a little confused, but he ate the whole bag of like 30 plus of them. It was excellent revenge. Automorborator replied, this is irrefutable proof that pee is stored in the nuts. Smelly revenge, indeed. Would it have been more satisfying if he somehow found out? Number 3. Tiny Chicken 1396 says, when I was a kid, my parents had 3 chihuahuas but didn't really take care of them, like at all. They wouldn't buy them dog food, just hot dogs and chicken nuggets. No vet visits. Nothing. They weren't even allowed to sleep inside the house because they weren't house trained. But the 2 occasions that stick out to me were one when the female had puppies. She had 8, but since she wasn't properly taken care of, she spent the entire day roaming the yards and dropping sacks of puppies. My mom was grossed out, so she didn't want to help, so it was up to 9-year-old me and a nice neighbor to look for these bloody sacks of dead puppies. Only 2 survived. And 2 as early as about 10 years old I took it upon myself to wash the dogs. And they were all covered in fleas. Like a disgusting number of fleas. I would bathe them, apply some cheap flea shampoo, and use a toothpick to go through their fur and remove anywhere from 30 to 50 fleas at a time and crush them with my nails. It was god-awful, and to this day I refuse to ever bring an animal into my home unless I can 100% take care of it properly. Edit. I'm sorry, but this was many years ago. Almost 20 years ago. Please stop telling me I have to report it. I was a child in an impossible situation, just trying to survive and give those dogs whatever small acts of kindness I could. I no longer have contact with my mom now that I'm an adult. Dirty Shoe Rack replied, your parents are assholes. Yes they were. That's quite tragic and traumatizing to experience as a kid. I'm sorry you had such horribly immature parents and had to be strong in their stead. I'm sure the pups appreciate what you did more than you know. Kindness is never the wrong answer. Number 4. King Kermit V says, I was 18. I was at the primary care physician having some tests ran. I was complaining of some stomach issues and they wanted a stool sample. I was handed a small cup and they said just push a little out. They didn't need much. They handed me a paper plate and on top was a cup, the top of the cup, a stool softener and gloves. I sat and waited until finally I felt something. What came out of me can only be described as a tree trunk coming out of my ass. It unfortunately pushed the cup out of my hand due to its weight and went into toilet. The weight of the cup with the turd splashed water all the way up to my neck. I flipped out. WTF do I do? Out of all the logical ways to handle this situation, I grabbed the turd and put it on the paper plate. I grabbed the cup and threw it away because it was dirty and fell in toilet. I stared at the medium rare tomahawk turd that I produced. Do I split it? That question just never made its way into my brain. I walked out the bathroom holding a paper plate with a turd on it and placed it on the checkout counter. I cannot describe the poor girl's face of horror. I explained the situation, holding back tears from the anxiety attack I was having, but it looked like I was laughing. The doctor came out, grabbed the plate, and must have sliced and diced it into the office. No words were exchanged. I left. I got a call later in the week with good news that I was healthy, but to find another primary care physician. Number 5. Okay, Outlandishness 634 says. In 3rd grade, a girl I had a crush on offered me a cool mechanical pencil in class if I dragged my tongue across the entire classroom floor. I did it twice and she didn't give it to me. She also didn't date me when I asked her out. I guess I was down bad in 3rd grade. Her name is Cassidy. Adult me knows to never trust someone with such an uncommon name, too unpredictable. Some people are just scummy. Hopefully she's learned to be a better person as she aged. Number 6. Head Statistician 38 says. Disgusting and the why would you do that? Wait, but I am ashamed and embarrassed about this, and no people will think this is fucked, but here goes. When I was 15, a very, very horny teenager, I was watching a film with my dad, lying down. A hot woman was on the screen and I got an erection. I had my hands down my pants and I started having a wank. I thought I was being subtle. I didn't think he would notice, but I was right next to him. He just said, "What are you doing down there?" in a tone that translated as, "Why are you doing that? Stop." I obviously stopped. I said nothing. I tried to come up with an excuse like I was scratching my balls or anything, but like it was so obvious that I had nothing, and said nothing. This was 9 years ago and neither of us has acknowledged it. I hope he has forgotten. Knowing my dad, it is possible, but I hate that this happened. This is the most embarrassing moment of my life, and I am telling it here because I will take it to the grave. I will never tell anyone about this. Number 7. Vitamin D says. This is very dangerous, and I would not recommend, but when I was in college, I was taking the trash out from my apartment before I left for class. And in my particular apartment at the time, this meant putting it in my car and driving it over to the trash compactor. I did so, and when I threw it into the machine, the bag got caught on my car keys and pulled the whole set into the machine with it. Fortunately, this was the kind of machine that didn't really compact anything while the door was still open. So, for a hot second, I just stood there, dumbfounded, trying to figure out what to do. Luckily, one of my neighbors rolled up a few seconds later with her own trash bag, so in a panic I asked her to hold the door for me while I crawled into that thing to grab them. As an adult in my 30s now, I don't know how I didn't get crushed to death. Honestly. Especially with just some random middle-aged lady holding my life on her hands. But I had a test in the class I was about to leave for, so I felt like I didn't have much of a choice. So in I went. It was exceptionally disgusting. I was living in Georgia at the time, and it was late spring, so it was disgustingly hot and swampy in there, on top of all the trash juice and other general unpleasantness. However, the keys had landed in a fairly easy spot, so once I got myself down the little chute, it was pretty easy to get the bag. But I will never forget the look on that woman's face when I rebirthed myself out onto the world, smelling faintly of garbage, having done probably the stupidest thing of my life. I wonder if she ever tells people about that. Number 8. Sober Under Par says. When I was in the depths of my heroin addiction, I used water from a puddle on the side of the road to shoot up. Ginger Minge replied. I once shot up with toilet bowl water from a gas station bathroom. My partner in crime had told me to do it, meaning using the water from the tank. Oops. Luckily, nothing happened to me. And luckily, I'm now 12 years clean. That's actually kinda sad. Addiction is a terrible thing to deal with no matter the circumstances. Number 9. Wonderland for me says. Clinic visit because I had a C-section wound that was infected. I didn't realize how infected until the doctor told me that he was going to need to cut me open right there in the clinic. But we are in the actual hospital. Can't we go to to the emergency department? I frantically asked. A 20-year-old mother. The father already absent a few weeks in. The doctor injected a local into the areas around my wound, went and got a tray of tools and a nurse. When they came back in the room, I was scared and freaking out, especially since I have always had a horrible history with severe strep infections multiple times a year, mostly throat and ear, but tooth socket, face, and knee as well. The doctor grabbed a scalpel and cut me open along the C-section wound. Unfortunately, if I looked at him, I had a rather good view of everything reflected in his glasses. I could see the infection was to a cottage cheese consistency in places. He could pick it up with his fingers and scoop it out. That is how he got much of it out, with his fingers. I was hospitalized for the infection. They couldn't close the wound again, it had to close on its own, which took months. It was decades ago, but I can feel it again as I type this. Mars 1975 replied. Happened to me with a hernia operation. Took about 6 months to close. But the infection got in my testes and they had to keep cutting them open over and over. So, I had like 4 holes from my guts to my nuts I had to pack with iodine-soaked gauze and pull scar tissue out of with forceps on my own because you can't live in a hospital, nor would you want to. Number 10. AskReddit says. This was around 2nd or 3rd grade around Christmas time. At my school, we had this really wonderful Advent time at school. We would sit in a dimmed light room. The teachers would light some candles, and we'd sing Christmas songs, get some gingerbread cookies. One child would get to place a piece in a homemade Christmas crib as an Advent calendar, and we'd watch an episode of this wonderful Christmas show we have in Norway, called Joel I Blafgel. It was the highlight of my day, and it was so cozy and nice and I loved it. One day, I was sitting in the back, and I start to get really bad stomach cramps, and I feel really sick, and I puke. My whole mouth is filled with puke. But I keep it shut, and instead of going to the toilet or anything, I swallow it and do not say anything to anyone because I didn't want to get sent home from school. TLDR, I swallowed my own puke because I didn't want to get sent home from school. Hello, my name is Karen replied. It's impressive until you can't hold back anymore and it comes out the nose. Number 11. Rogue Raider 1 says. In high school, I was the weird awkward loner kid. I was offered a crisp $20 to take one bite out of a piece of pizza from the garbage bin. I ate the whole slice. Key Rage Alert replied. Well, you, my friend, have crossed the line that divides man and bum. You are now a bum. Number 12. Baker 1310 says. When I was living alone, I got really sick one time. I ended up getting food poisoning. In the middle of the night after like a whole day of barely eating anything and just throwing up and pooping all day, I felt like throwing up. I seriously couldn't even bring my own body up and I ended up throwing up besides my bed. I genuinely thought I'm gonna pass out and die in that moment. I wiped my face and went back to sleep. The next morning, in that sick and dehydrated state, I had to clean it up. That was the most exhausting and disgusting thing I've done. Somehow this one doesn't sound as bad. I think most of us have experienced severe food poisoning to know that it's not a pretty situation in any way. Number 13. Watson 1984 says, I came home drunk as skunk from the pub with a curry. Halfway through the curry I vomited onto plate. I ate the rest of my curry in the vomit. Vivid Chip 6094 replied, Is this the famous infinity food glitch people are now talking about? Okay, that one makes me feel a little queasy. Well done. Number 14. Rat 6578 says, Went to sleep with my dog in my room. Woke up to what felt like dirt in my bed, so I got out of bed, still groggy as fuck, and stepped in some slimy substance which caused me to slip back into my bed where there was a dried piece of dog shit that I was sleeping with. Nearly instantly woke up from the fall and very quickly realized that my dog had shit herself in my bed and in about 14 different locations on my carpet. I spent like 5 hours that day cleaning up dog shit out of my carpet after taking a shower. My poor dog was fed something the previous night that caused her to shit her brains out all over my room. As a germaphobe, one of if not the worst day of my life. Number 15. Bitchy Baklava says, When I was in the low point of my alcoholism and unable to require vodka, I drank my bong cleaner liquid, isopropyl alcohol mixed with whatever remnants of my bong junk. Don't really remember what happened after that, fuzzy memories of my partner and I in the back of an ambulance. But I do remember what that shit tasted like. Makes me gag thinking about it. NCMTP replied, I learned that my grandmother was truly unhinged when she started telling the family that my grandfather was such a bad alcoholic that he was drinking bottles of rubbing alcohol every day since she'd removed all of the other alcohol from the house. Turns out in the messy divorce that followed that all the alcohol in the house was one bottle of expensive gin, and that she considered him an alcoholic because he'd occasionally, like once every 2 weeks, have a gin and tonic. I will never forget him crying about how she was divorcing him, lamenting that he'd never actually ever been drunk once in his entire life because she would be mad if he had been. But I went NC with Grandma after she divorced him, while they were both in their late 70s and had been married since they were both 18. She then turned around and married a 95-year-old man she knew through their church, as they could better serve God if they were together. Last time I saw her, she was drinking a very tall glass of wine with a normal weekday dinner. Sorry, you brought up some exciting memories with your story. Drinking isopropyl alcohol will absolutely fuck you up. I saw it happen a few times when I was a paramedic full-time. Couldn't believe that my 78-year-old grandmother thought she could get away with that lie about my grandfather, yet most of the family believed her. I hope you are doing better now. Number 16. Traxia says, well, willingly because I am not a jerk. Beware, shit story ahead. I helped with cleaning out a yacht overflowing with feces. Someone of our mates was stupid enough to take a huge dump in boat toilets instead of going out on the land. We were anchored few meters from natural beach. It led to, surprisingly, toilet being clogged. It started to overflow terribly and apparently, the dude tried to flush it several times, only making it worse. We had to make a chain of people, passing to each what we called the shit bucket and empty it through side of the boat. It took a long time. Thankfully, it wasn't me who had to dive underwater to get to the toilet output and unclog it with a fucking toothbrush. We didn't have anything more suitable. Oh, the funny times. I could smell feces all over the boat for next 3 days. Number 17. Chicken Bean says, I once dropped an unopened bottle of tonic wine into a portaloo and before I had even thought twice, I had reached in and recovered it. Reader, I drank the wine. Yes, I washed it. No, I didn't get sick. Number 18. UK Spitfire 90 says, I suffer with a pilonidal cyst, which can turn into an abscess. It basically swells up one side of your ass cheek with pus and blood. First time it got bad, I was too embarrassed to go to a doctor because I didn't know what it was. And it's on your ass. Left side of my ass got so swollen and painful that I decided to get into the shower and stab the swollen painful ass cheek with a kitchen knife. I had plenty of rum before I did it to try numb the pain. Made a decent-sized wound and then proceeded to push blood and pus out of my ass. When I couldn't take it anymore, I stumbled into my bedroom and passed out. When I awoke the next day, the smell of death was awful. I was laid in an infected pool of liquid, feeling so ill. I still didn't tell anyone and just laid there all day. I was sick for a few days until I started to feel better. After it flaring up again and again over a few years, I finally went to see a doctor about it. They scolded me for my stupid DIY shower stabbing, saying I could have given myself blood poisoning and killed myself. Very lucky. Moral of the story, go to the doctor if you are ill, don't feel embarrassed. Don't try to sort it yourself. It could end very badly. Maybe I am spoiled because I live somewhere with somewhat affordable health care. But please go see a doctor when in doubt. Rather a bill than an amputation or death notice. Number 19. Celia says, became a nurse. And then decided to go into aged care with my degree. Still scratching my head on that one. Not a day goes by where I'm not cleaning up someone's feces, chronic and cancerous wounds, sputum, etc. But someone has to, I guess. Number 20. Plasman says, was up in a cabin for a week with people I didn't really know. At the time I was really nervous about pooping around others, so for as long as I could I held in my poop in thinking I could last the whole trip and go home and do it in peace. The entire time we were eating nothing but meat, so after about the 5th day I started getting woozy from my stomach pains and had to go try and push one out. I was in labor for about 2 hours, but nothing was coming out even though it had breached a bit, so no turning back. But I was worried the others would notice me in there so long, so my anxiety started to build and I decided I needed to do something. The reason it wasn't coming out was because it was far too big for my hole but way too dense to squeeze through. I was really panicking at this point and in a world of pain. So desperately, I managed to reach in with a few fingers and started breaking off little chunks of this behemoth and trying to coax it out. There was poop under my nails from clawing at it. It was so dense that I was able to actually wrap my hand around it and pull on it. I finally tugged it hard enough that it came out whole. This bad boy was easily the girth of a Coke can and about 10 inches long. It was too big to flush, so I had to reach in and break it down with my hand. My hole didn't completely close for like 2 days, and I was limping, but the internal shame of having to arm wrestle my own asshole was the worst part. Number 21. The social introvert says, when I was a horny teenager, I thought it would be a good idea to come on a chocolate biscuit and eat it. I was also at my grandparents' at the time. Anyway, obviously after I came all over the biscuit, I wasn't horny anymore and didn't want to eat it, so I went to go to the garden to throw it away. That's when I bumped into my granddad, who told me to hurry up and eat the biscuit, because it looked like it was melting. So I ate the cum-covered biscuit in front of him. So probably that. Number 22. Yucky Duck PH says, tried swallowing some shrooms down with Mountain Dew because I hated the taste. One got stuck sideways, making me gag until I threw up. Because I wanted to trip so bad, I dug through the puke that was on a dirty garage floor and re-ate every shroom I could find. Yes, I did have a great trip after. Number 23. Spent an afternoon with a bucket and a soup ladle after my wife of 3 months told me that she had accidentally dropped her wedding and engagement rings into a porta potty. Me, are you sure? You've looked everywhere else they could possibly be. Her, yes. I heard the rings go plop when they dropped in. The process went like this. 1. Scoop up some blue stew. 2. Dump it in the bucket. 3. Slosh it around, hoping to find the rings. 4. Dump bucket in next porta potty, repeat as necessary. About 2 hours later, my wife comes back to the latrine area and says you're going to hate me. Holds up the rings. They were in my purse the whole time. We're still married. She still owes me. Number 24. These Chargases. Dropped my phone in a thoroughly used porta potty outside the bar. Took a deep breath and plunged my arm in. A few moments later my hand hit a solid object, which I excitedly grabbed assuming it was my phone. I quickly learned it was not my phone, nor was it as solid as I thought. Well, those were some wild voluntary recollections indeed. Leave your thoughts below in the comments. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes.